All right, well, I am super
Okay.
excited to have Kristen, is it KDP Letters on the Passion Behind the Art Show. Kristen, welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
For those who don't know, Kristen has been killing it for years, and I would love to know how did this lettering, um, a lot of illustrations in the lettering, how did this creative journey start for you?
Yeah, this is always a hard, sorry, my dog's making insane noises behind me, of course. Um, so it's always hard because I feel like the creative journey probably started like as soon as I was old enough to hold a pencil. Like I've always really loved drawing and being creative. But in terms of lettering, like I really didn't touch a sketchbook between high school and until my mid 20s because art never occurred to me as anything beyond a hobby. And while I was going to school, I was busy, I was working two jobs, going to school. It never was a hobby that I pursued. So between the ages of like 16 up until 25, I didn't create art at all outside of like graphic design, which was very different for me at the time. I was using fonts and a computer to create the work that I wanted. So, a calligraphy class was posted in the city that I live in about 10 years ago. And I had always had an interest in letters. Like, I remember just being in junior high, passing notes and trying out like different fonts and like styles of lettering for how I would write notes to my friends. So I just thought it would be like a fun way to spend an afternoon. So I signed up for this one off calligraphy workshop, and it was maybe 1 or 2 hours, and it just like unlocked this obsession for letters within me. Like all it took was just having someone show me how to properly hold the calligraphy pen and draw letters, and I was just completely obsessed. Like really, I haven't not drawn letters since that day 10 years ago. Like I started after that workshop, I bought all the fountain pens and all the fountain inks and was like, calligraphy is it for me. Like I just want to be able to draw these beautiful calligraphy letters. But then it quickly turned into I was a little bit I felt limited by the limits that there are in calligraphy, where it all kind of needs to look consistent and follow consistent lines. And I just started to get a lot more
Hmm.
interested in hand lettering and incorporating those illustrations and actually drawing letters, because it didn't rely on such like a precision of holding the pen a certain way and having a really steady hand. I liked the ability to kind of get messy and like sketch and build and really create unique looking letters that looked different than what I was seeing in calligraphy. So, yeah, so I'd say, well, the creative journey started when I was like a kid because I've always loved drawing and being creative. It really kicked off about 10 years ago with that calligraphy workshop. That was kind of like what I needed to discover that lettering was the form of art that I
Sweet,
really
sweet.
wanted to
Remind me
pursue.
who was doing the workshop?
Yeah, so the workshop was by this artist named Kevin King, and he's like a master calligrapher based out of Toronto, Canada. And he was fantastic because he was a really good instructor in terms of communicating just the importance of like practice, and that because like everyone sucks right out of the gate. So like the first thing I drew in calligraphy was just like a blot of ink that like destroyed the whole page, and just being like, oh God, well, I obviously suck at this. Like, and he is just like, everyone does. Like, literally everyone sucks at first. Just keep going. So that was really inspiring. And so,
Sweet.
yeah, he was a great
So
instructor.
this, for the most part, started on like paper because you're very digital now. Like, how was that
Yes.
transition from paper to digital?
Yeah, I was paper for, yeah, basically like the first 7 years that I was lettering. And I got an iPad because I started just seeing what people were sharing the work that they were creating on their iPad. And it was just like when I was doing pen and paper, I was very much like the colors I was using were black, gold, and the color of my pencil. So when I started seeing all this like beautiful, colorful work that was possible on the iPad, that was really intriguing. So I picked up an iPad and was just kind of like scared of it for about a year and a half. Like everything I drew, I was like, I don't know, it just
Mm,
like doesn't have the same impact for me as drawing in a sketchbook. Like I kind of liked the messiness and things were looking a little bit too digital on the iPad. So it took me a little while to be able to kind of transfer my skills and then figure out
Hmm.
how to build those textures and how to have still that kind of vibe of it's still hand drawn even though it's done digitally. So it was a tough transition. But when I think back to like I was getting some client commissions when I was still doing just like pencil and paper, like a magazine reached out to me for an editorial illustration. And I was just like, sure, no problem. But then like panicking at how like I was like, so I draw it on paper and then I have to like scan it in and then like it was just a mess and like trying to clean it up in Photoshop was impossible. So
Hmm.
it was necessary to invest in that digital skill set. So now just the world it's opened up for client projects and the work that I can do has been phenomenal. It was just very limiting working with paper. So it was worth it, but it took me, yeah, probably a year and a half to 2 years to really be able to have the Procreate in
Hmm.
my iPad
Any
be my
tips on
comfort zone of
like
sketching.
how to make that transition smoother?
Yeah, your timing's great actually because I'm filming a Procreate lettering class for Skillshare right now. So that's been like top of mind is like how do you make that transition? So one thing for me is I was struggling with like how slippery and smooth the iPad screen
Hmm.
was. Like just the feel of drawing on a screen is so much different than drawing on paper. So I did purchase and I still use them
Hmm.
like the paper like screen protectors that you can pick up. So they add like this nice kind of like texture to your iPad screen. And that just helped mimic the feeling of drawing on paper in my sketchbook.
Okay.
So it made it a lot more comfortable to be able to do that. And then it's really just kind of like forcing yourself to use it because everything in my comfort zone was like just wanting to continue to use a sketchbook, but forcing myself to just try it on the iPad, like just try it. And even taking pictures of old sketches and trying to recreate them on my iPad helped
That's
kind of
cool.
bridge
That's
that
cool.
gap
That's
for me as well.
because I've still yet to.
Yeah.
The only thing I do on the iPad is logo projects. I want to create something unique,
Mm-hmm.
but most of the times I'm doing the rest of it on my computer. Like I'll get the skeletons and the bones, and I'll
Right.
do a whole bunch of sketches for a logo, and then
Yep.
I'll jump in my computer. I haven't gotten, and
Mm-hmm.
plus I don't do it as much, so that's probably part of it too.
Right. Yeah, it's like keeping up that practice because yeah, if you're not using it enough, because I was kind of the same where I'd like do most of the drawing in my sketchbook and only really use my
Hmm.
iPad for like some of the cleanup. But once I came to like, okay, no, the sketching happens on the iPad, the cleanup happens on like everything I'm just doing on my iPad, then I got so much more comfortable with the medium. But as a result, of course, like then the sketchbook skills falter a little bit because so it's like you can only ever really hone one thing really well because when I went to do like I did a new Skillshare class recently that was all about drawing with pencil and paper and then I was like, oh shit, like, do I still know how to draw with pencil and paper? Like, I'm like trying to zoom in on my paper iPad or like trying to double
Nope.
tap to undo. And you're like, right, that's not a thing that you can do on paper. So you like kind of lose some of your skills when you like prefer one medium over the other.
It's
But
good to know
yeah,
that I'm not the only one that's ever double tapped paper.
no, it's absolutely not. No, literally yesterday, my parents gave, it's like my birthday next week. So my parents gave me this like old picture of me as a kid and I was like holding up the photograph, like I can't really see it. I'm like going like this to the photo, like, oh my God, like what is
Oh my
wrong
gosh. Oh
with
my
me?
gosh.
It's awful. So yeah,
Our
you're
lives
not the
will never
first.
be the same because of screens. It's so funny.
I
So you
know.
have a
It's
very
embarrassing.
unique
Yeah.
style. I think that's one of the things that almost every designer, artist, they want to have a style. Like, how did this unique style come about? Like, did
Hmm.
it just happen, osmosis? Like, how did it come about?
That's a good question. So I have kind of like an embarrassing story that I haven't told many people, which really I feel like was like a fork in the road for me where I started to discover my personal style. So when I first started, so like 10 years ago, I was just practicing drawing letters. And I'm not going to name names, but there was a particular artist that I really, really liked. Like I just thought she had the coolest style. And so a lot of the lettering I was doing, I would be like looking at her
Hmm.
work and not copying, but looking at her style and then trying to like kind of do my version of that style. So I guess I was looking at her work too much for inspiration because after about, and this was when I probably had like 32 followers, like I was brand new to lettering, like maybe a couple months in. And I got a message from that lettering artist, and she basically was like, "You're totally copying my style. Like, what are you doing? Like, you should go figure your own style out." So I
Mm.
was devastated because I saw a message come in from her, and I was like, my like lettering idol, like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And then I like clicked in to open it and was like, oh my God, like, I am so embarrassed. I had
Right.
no intention of copying anyone's style.
Mm.
Like, I just felt terrible. But it was a really good example of like, I wasn't taking in enough inspiration. I was only looking to
Hmm.
really like one or two sources for inspiration. And so as a result of that, my work was really looking way too close to this person's unique style
Hmm.
that they had spent years honing. So that's not fair to them, obviously. So from that point forward, I was like, this feels like either a moment where I'm like, well, I quit lettering altogether. I'm garbage. And like, why am I even trying? But instead of going down that path, I chose to go like, okay, so I unfollowed her, not because I didn't like her work, obviously, I loved it,
Hmm.
but I didn't want to get influenced by her style anymore because it was clearly like having too strong of an influence on my work. And I instead kind of went off of Instagram for inspiration and stopped looking at
Hmm.
what other people were doing and tried to find like, where do I find my inspiration without looking at someone else's style? So that became like walking around my own city, looking at like the signs, the architecture on the buildings, going to antique stores. I love, like, I got so much inspiration from work that was created long before I existed on Earth.
Yeah.
So, like, the Victorian era, like back when everything was hand drawn and just like really beautiful, back when people didn't have their own
Hmm.
references to copy styles from, like, they were just creating their own. So I just started pulling inspiration from a bunch of new and different sources, trying to draw without any reference at all, like just sitting down in front of a blank page and going like, well, what hand,
Hmm.
like what marks do my hand make when I'm not thinking of anyone else's work? And that really helped me to develop my own unique style and voice. So as much as it was really embarrassing and really like humbling to be like, oh God, like what am I doing? I've been spending months just clearly copying this person. It was really, really valuable. Like I'm so glad that I had that experience because it really forced me to like realize that inspiration needs to come from everywhere, a bunch of different sources. And then it also kind of taught me, because looking back on that moment as an artist with now 10 years behind me and a clearly distinct style, and I'm successful with my career, I would never, ever want to message an artist who's clearly just brand new to the game, just trying. Like, I sucked back then. Like, I was not creating work that you needed to be intimidated by. And so to like reach out to someone like that and be like, you can't do this style, it's my style. It's a hard, like, obviously plagiarism is no good and copying people's work exactly sucks, but it's hard to be like, I own Victorian style vintage lettering. Like, you don't own
Nothing.
anything. It's like that whole idea of
Hmm.
like that book, Steal Like an Artist, where, yeah, like everyone's influenced by everything. What happens when you share your work on a public platform like Instagram is people are going to see it. They're going to be influenced by it. Like it's the nature of the game. So I always like to look ahead rather than look back and try and like bring people down or tell them to not be doing what they're doing. Like I see people tag me in work all the time that looks similar to mine, and I'm just like,
Hmm.
awesome, good for you. Like keep practicing, keep discovering your style. That's great. I just think that approach is much more friendly to the art scene than like a protective, like, stop doing what you're doing, it looks too much like mine. I just think that can be a kind of a negative space
Okay,
to live
I'm
in.
curious now because I just feel like now I don't mean to embarrass you, but you got a very sweet soul. Like,
No.
where did that kind of come from? Like, what would you give credit to?
Oh, a sweet soul. That's so nice. I don't think anyone has said it like that to me before. That's very nice. I I think for me, it's just like I feel like I don't know where it came from. That's a
Mhm,
great question. I'm like, maybe my parents should get the credit. I don't know. But I feel like for me, there's like two ways that you can go about things. So there's like that path of negativity where you can go
mhm,
like there's not enough room for everyone. Everyone's out to get like looking behind and around. And where I have always seen the most success is the other path, which is just focus on what you're
mhm,
doing. That's all that you can control. I've never seen anything good come out of feeling like
mhm,
everything's a competition or there's not enough room for everyone. I have always seen the most success when I'm just head down, focus on what I can
mhm,
control, what I am good at, and trying to uplift others. It's kind of that idea of like
mhm,
the rising tide lifts all boats. Like when I'm doing better, when the industry's doing
mhm.
better, it's better for everyone. It's not good for anyone if I'm approaching things from
Yeah, it
negativity. Like
kind of
it just
that
doesn't
just
help
reminds me
anyone.
of this thought of like scarcity and abundance mindset. Yeah, it's like scarcity is like it's always
Hmm.
competitive. There's not enough room, and then there's like this abundance mindset where it's just like there's literally room for everyone.
Totally. Yes. And it's so hard because I still struggle with that. Like I find when I start getting in the mode of like, oh my God, like
Hmm.
there's not enough projects for anyone. Like I've got to just, like protect what I've got. Um, that usually comes from having looked at social media for too long. Like it's always when I'm like
Mm,
scrolling for too long on Threads or Instagram, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, like look at all these people announcing all these exciting projects they're on.
right.
Like, what about for me? Like all these projects are taken, there's nothing left. And it's just, yeah, it's never the right mindset and no good ever comes from it. But it's really easy to fall into the scarcity mind trap. So it's harder to
It
practice like
is.
abundance and like, no, there's always going to be enough for everyone. Like no one does
Mhm.
it exactly like you, all of those thoughts. But yeah, it's a constant thing that you have to work on. It's not like I'm like I've mastered it and I never worry about scarcity at all. Like it definitely the odd time I do
Sweet.
get caught up
I'm
in that
curious, what are
mindset
some of the
too.
ways you kind of generate revenue with your talent currently, your profession?
Ooh, yeah, it's funny because when I started, like when I first went as a full-time artist, I tried to do like a forecast for myself of like what will I need to do in order to earn a living that compares to my like corporate career. And at the time, I was just so significantly undercharging for projects that my forecast is like hilarious because it's like I'd have to do like 1,500 chalkboards and then like 30 murals and then like 100 logos. Like it was insane. So, what I've actually learned over the last 3 years of managing my business is that murals are kind of like my bread and butter. Like murals pay quite well, they're really rewarding. And so those are kind of like that's kind of the bulk of where my income comes from is definitely the mural space, whether it's like digital created murals that are then printed or actual hand painted murals. And then outside of that, I like to diversify my income in a few different ways. So like art licensing is one path that I've just really started down, like not heavy into that yet at all, but being able to license work that exists. Like I've had a few designs that I've licensed to Trader Joe's, and it's just so rewarding to be like, these are pieces that I just created because I had some free time. So I like drew up a thank you card, and now it's sold all across the United States, and I get paid royalties every few months. It's just very cool, and it's like
Hmm.
this good passive source of income that's out there. So I really love that space, and there's a lot of room to grow in art licensing for me. And then when it comes to teaching, I used to do a lot more in-person
Okay.
lettering workshops. I've I get really, really nervous to do in-person workshops. Like I'll book them and then just dread them for months. So
No,
I
I
know it's
just get it.
terrible.
I get
So I
it.
always really like them in the moment. Yeah, right? Like, yeah, doing them, like the actual act of doing them, I really like it. Like people are so wonderful. It's really rewarding. but the months leading up to the workshop happening, I just am like filled with dread. So, but I get a lot of requests for workshops, and I really do love being able to share knowledge and help people. So I've decided over the last year to really instead
Mm,
prioritize digital workshop content because it removes the dread for me. Like I'm still delivering the content, but in a way that's much more comfortable for me. So like I mentioned, I've got one Skillshare class out. I'm working on my next one and then starting to plan the one after that. So my hope is to kind of release a couple workshops or classes on Skillshare a year. And that's another kind of source of, I don't want to say passive income
mhm.
because there are a lot of
Sure.
work to like plan and film and edit, but it is nice kind of like evergreen content that once it's created, it's kind of out there and earning a little bit of income along the way. So yeah, so those are kind of the big areas. And then I have a few personal projects that I like to do. Like I've released a line of seed packets that are all like illustrated by hand, and I wholesale those seed packets all across North America. So that's another just like it's not a huge like moneymaker scheme or anything. It's more just like a personal passion project that is still a source of income by wholesaling my products to retailers. So yeah, so I've always kind of got different money making schemes cooking up over here, but yeah,
And
murals
this,
would be kind
the
of the biggest
packaging,
one.
the seed packaging, that is to and from, right? Yes,
Mhm.
okay.
That's right. Yeah, to and from Gift Co. So yeah, I decided to create kind of a its own
Mm-hmm.
separate kind of brand and company for that, just so that I could kind of wholesale those products. So it started with seed packets, and then I've got a million ideas for other things I'd like to do eventually. But right now, yeah, I've had quite a bit of success with the seed
That's
packets,
cool.
so
That's
it's
cool.
been awesome.
I have to send you something offline. A friend of mine, she went to like a gardening conference, like a festival. And
Ooh,
me neither.
oh wow, I didn't
So
even
when
know
I
that existed.
saw when I was kind of going through doing my homework and I saw this, because I didn't even know you did this all the time. I was familiar with all your other stuff. I was like, I should make that connection. That would be a cool spot to
Hmm.
like just be able to network at. Hmm.
Yeah. That's actually, yeah, that's a great idea. Definitely send that my way because yeah, that's one of the things I'm trying to look into amongst many other things was like, right, I've got these seed packets, but because they're totally like a personal passion project, they don't get a ton of my attention and there's so much
100%.
opportunity in that space where I'm like, right, I should be doing
Hmm.
like trade shows and gardening festivals that I just haven't had time to look into. So yeah, send that my way and I'll
All right, so who
see if
would
I
you
can make
say
it
that
happen next
person
year.
was that kind of kept you going, kind of believed in everything that you were doing, that person that you know you could draw inspiration, encouragement from?
Yeah, so that would definitely be my husband, Justin. So I have the benefit of being married to someone who had been
Mm,
an artist for his whole life, and he was an animation director for about 15 years. So he had a ton of experience, like he's had sketchbooks maintained for his whole life, like really understood what it's like to hone an
mm,
artistic craft and the benefit of like, it's just practice. It's those people that are like, I can't even draw a stick person. And you're like, but you could, like if you drew a stick person every day for the next year, you'd be able to draw amazingly well. Um, and that's really not something that I think people understand unless you've really put the work in and seen those skills develop. So when I started, I sucked like everyone does. So I was just like, this is not like drawing letters that I didn't look like how I wanted them to look. And he was just able to see that potential in me like right away almost. He was like, no, no, like this is good. Like keep it up. It's all like he taught me the concept of pencil mileage. So
mm.
that idea that like every mark you make is just kind of like building up this tank of experience and over time you'll get better. It's against logic to think that you would get worse by practicing every
Right,
day. Like
right.
it's impossible. Just like keep at it, stick with it, you will improve. So I think without him in my ear kind of being like, no, no, like this is good. Like, see, I like what you've done here and maybe like try this instead. He was kind of like coaching me along the way. And I think without that, it would have been really easy to just like look at what I was doing and be like, I just don't think I have it. Like maybe I'm just not meant to be artistic. Like this looks like garbage. I'm frustrated. I'm going to give up. But having that concept of like, no, every mark you draw gets you one step closer to
Hmm.
drawing what you want to be drawing. It really made me stick with it and draw like pages and like I filled sketchbooks and sketchbooks and sketchbooks until I was happy with what I was drawing to the point of like, I'm gonna
Hmm.
actually like share this on Instagram. So yeah, he was definitely
It's funny
there
about that.
helping
Like
me along the
sometimes you don't
way.
even really think about it. Like someone will, so I do a lot of calligraphy, and most of it is offline. I never share it. I'm either doing
Hmm.
something for either my church or something like that. Someone will ask me for
Right.
something personal, whatever. But like the one of the questions they'll always
Hmm.
ask, like, how did you do this? And I always have to think for a second, and it's just like it's those times where either I'm watching TV or I'm just sitting around and I'm just like doing pages upon pages upon pages upon pages of calligraphy. And just out of just like I'm not even thinking about it.
Yeah, that's the best when you can like hit that like you're just zoned out and just like putting the time in. Like that's yeah, I feel like that's when you know you've totally found the thing
Hmm.
that you were meant to find when you can zone out and just do it and not like it doesn't feel like grueling hours of work because like you said you're just like watching TV or whatever. Yeah, that's where I got to with lettering too, where it was just like pay like stacks of sketchbooks and just like it's all I wanted to do. Like you just, it's all you ever want to be
That's
doing.
awesome.
So
So
yeah, it's
what
really
would you say
special.
was the biggest fear? Because to me it sounds like you had it all together. There was no fear. You kind of just jumped in and just knocked it all out of the park.
Yes, that's exactly it was there was no challenge. No. Yeah, like along the way, there
Hmm.
were tons of like little micro fears of like, oh my God, I suck. This is embarrassing. Why am I even trying? Like a lot of those thoughts for sure before I even got to the point of like, maybe I'll post this on Instagram. Like there was a lot of just like
Hmm.
in your head, like, what's the point? What if people hate it? What if people hate me? But I think that one of the biggest fears that I overcame, which when I made the decision, it didn't feel that scary because of all those like micro fears
Hmm.
that I kind of battled along the way. But one of the biggest things was just like, how do I fully bet on myself and make lettering something that I can do for a living? Because in my ear along the way, like over the past 10 years, it's like so much of my identity was wrapped up in being a corporate lady that like
Hmm.
was climbing up the ladder and like working in marketing. Like a lot of my identity was wrapped up in that. And then there were people in my ear, my dad, like, what about your pension? What about your benefits? Like, why would
Hmm.
you ever leave a corporate job to do art? Like, it just didn't seem like a possible thing. So going up against just so many people being like,
Hmm.
oh, like I could never do it. It's so risky. Like, what if it doesn't work out? Like, all of those things. Just being able to confidently be like, I get it, but like, I'm going to try anyway. So it was scary for sure, but less scary because of the fact that I had already put in almost a decade of practice and starting to feel a lot more confident in the skill set that I had. And just thinking, like, if I'm seeing success when I'm just doing this, like in the evenings outside of my corporate job, like, what kind of success would I see if I like opened up my whole schedule to just being able to do lettering? Like what would happen then if I actually like went after clients and started to build my own business. So it was scary, but definitely the best
That's
thing I have
awesome.
ever
I
done.
mean, it's always interesting to hear this. I think one of the things that stuck out to me is like, how did you're probably super organized, but like, how did you get that calendar? Having so much now, because it's kind of easier when you like, it's after work.
Mm.
I know what time I have. I know what time I'm going to use. Like, how did you kind of
Hmm.
map out, wow, I have a full 8 hours to just or more to kind of dedicate to this throughout the day? How did you make your days productive?
Hmm. That's a good question. Yeah, I am naturally a pretty organized person, so I feel like My problem is more so on the other side of like, how do I make sure that I am not working 24/7?
Hmm.
Because I'll burn out. Like, it's not physically possible to do that. And I do have a tendency to overwork and to like put way more time into things and to put
Hmm.
pressures on myself that aren't real. Like, as a business owner, I find myself a lot of the time being like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. There's so much work to do. I have all these things due, and then being like, oh, right, like I am my own boss. I literally have done this to myself. Like, I could adjust these timelines at any point. So it's just like, yeah, remembering that like I'm in charge, I can control all of this. What, like, what am I doing? So, yeah, in terms of scheduling, it's more so trying to make sure
Hmm.
like I take time for myself, that rest is productive, like you don't always have to be working, because yeah, I'm naturally like pretty ambitious and just like by end of day Friday, I'll have a book launched, my course launched, and like 17 like just setting these insane expectations on myself. So yeah, so once my schedule opened up, it was realizing that regardless of how open my schedule is, I'm going to
Hmm.
always fill it with way too much work. So I need to make sure to build in that time to like regenerate and like re-energize and create
For
space for
sure.
other things
And
than work.
like as you, I'm pretty sure you know this, like, but creatives, like rest is just as important as any inspiration, anything you can learn, because we use so much brain power per day
Yeah,
that resting is just as
yeah,
important as anything we can inspire us.
totally. Yeah, it's hard to get on board with that because when you're really, really busy, the last thing you want to do, because like my husband also owns his own business, so we try and keep each other on track where like one of us will be like, oh, there's so much to do and I'm so stressed. And so the other person will be like, you should like meditate. And we're like, ah, like not right now. But like that's probably the best thing you can do in that moment when you're overwhelmed is like just meditate or like chill out a little bit. But it's really
Hmm.
hard to remember when you're like full tilt. But yeah, that's definitely something I've learned. Like
Hmm.
I've burnt myself out multiple times. So trying to remember that like when you take time away, it is really helping you to be more productive on the other side. Like if you stay up late burning the midnight oil till like 3 a.m. on a project, you're
For
just
sure.
stealing more time from the next day. So like you're not you'll never catch up on all the work that there is to do in the world. So like you have to build in that time. And for me, a big thing has been like trying to relax or check out. I have to like physically check out of my house. Like we have to like book a vacation at a cottage in another city. Because otherwise, if we're trying to like, we're on vacation, but we're still in our house, still near our offices and surrounded by work, inevitably it's too tempting to just like, well, maybe I'll just like quickly catch up on these things. Whereas if we're like out of the house, out doing something somewhere, and you like cannot just work on your iPad, it's a lot easier to get that
Sweet,
rest
sweet,
and
sweet. All right, let's
recharge
jump into some
again.
fun questions. What is that thing that you can't live without that's not your
Okay.
phone?
I was like, my phone. Oh God. And I guess I can't say my iPad either because it's a given. Yeah, my iPad is glued to me at all times. So I would
Okay.
say for me, it would be my dog. So I'm a big
Mm,
advocate for rescue dogs, and I will always be a family that has like multiple pets in the household. So we have two dogs right now, two little rescue pit bulls, and they're the sweetest. And they are really what keeps my
nice.
routine on track. And without them, like I probably wouldn't get dressed or leave the house for days at a time. So they're the ones that like they get me up in the mornings at like 6 o'clock demanding their breakfast. They get me out of the house every day at lunch for a big long dog walk. And on walks, I find that some of the best like recharge time because I'm just like listening to podcasts or listening to music and just thinking through things that I just need to get away from my desk and be able to like just think about and spend some time with in the fresh air. So yeah, they really and they end my work day like every day around 4. They're like, it's time for supper. So they just really keep me on track. So outside of like all the wonderful things they bring with just being like so sweet and loving and loyal, they also just keep like my days structured in a way that is hard to
Mm,
do when you are your own boss. Like
that's
there's no
true.
one being like, take your lunch break, but my dogs do that for me. So yeah, so I
Sweet,
definitely
sweet.
could
I
not
love
live
that. I
without
love that.
having
All right,
dogs.
book recommendations.
Yeah, so I'm reading this awesome. So I normally wouldn't recommend a book that I've only like that I haven't finished reading, but I'm only about a third of the way through this book called The Creative Act by Rick Rubin.
No.
Have you heard of that book? I hadn't heard of it either. I feel like I heard it. I heard, Jessica
Hmm.
Hish, the like queen of lettering. I feel like she recommended this book on some other podcast I listened to. So I just picked it up from the library last week, and already I can just tell that it's going to be a book that I like go back to again and again. It's one of those books that I've taken like photos of various quotes on pages to go
Sweet.
and refer back to. It's just really, really inspiring. So it's by, I didn't even, this is maybe embarrassing for me, but I didn't know who Rick Rubin was. My husband had to be
No
like,
judgment here.
he's like a super famous music producer. Yeah, I was like, I don't know who he is. But
Hmm.
apparently he's like super accomplished. So yeah, his book is amazing so far. So as long as it doesn't totally go downhill in the next two-thirds of the book, I would definitely
Oh my
recommend
gosh.
that
I get
one.
an email from Kristen. Oh, Daryl,
Um,
Daryl, don't put that one on there. It's actually terrible.
yeah, I'm like, cut that out. Things went south. It's horrible at the end. No, I'm sure it's amazing. But yeah, I'll keep you posted. The other book that I really love is this one called
I've
The
heard.
War of Art
Yeah, I've heard of
by
that one for sure.
Stephen Pressfield. So yeah, it's a pretty common one, I think. And I hadn't heard of it, but I read it as part of this course that I did. And I really loved it because it just gives a name to that thing that every creative, well, probably just every person on earth deals with, but that like internal struggle of like self doubt and just that struggle of
Hmm.
like not wanting to leave your comfort zone.
Hmm.
And he calls it the resistance throughout the book. So it's really about like overcoming that self doubt and not letting the resistance win. So it's really powerful for creative people. And it's one that I'm due to go back to and reread actually now, but I really love it because giving a name to that struggle that you feel is really helpful. So anytime that I'm like, oh, I don't know, I don't really want to do this thing, I'll kind of stop myself and go like, is it that I don't want to do
Hmm.
it, or is it the resistance? Like, is it just the world trying to keep me feeling comfortable in my like little comfort zone? And if I just push through that, then it'll actually be really great. So it's just kind of helps me
That makes
in
sense.
dealing with some of those
That's awesome.
internal
I like
battles that
that.
we all
I
feel.
think I'm gonna go get that one.
Yeah,
Oh, that one I'm definitely gonna get. I like the whole
it's
idea
a
of
good one.
overcoming the resistance.
Yeah, yeah, it's really good. And it's just I love when feelings are validated, like when you're like, is it
Hmm.
just me? Like does everyone feel like it's this painful to just do like basic seemingly things that come easy to other people? And it's just a good reminder that like everyone
Hmm.
feels those challenges at some
And,
point
and
and like
and when you
yeah,
find
it
that
gives
out,
some
it
good
kind of
advice for just being
normalizes
able to
it in the
overcome.
sense that it's not that big of a deal. Like other people are dealing with this too.
Yeah, it makes it less scary.
Hmm.
Yeah, totally. It's that reminder that like literally no one knows what they're doing at
All right, so
any
what
given
is the
time.
first hour of Kristen's day like?
When you sent this question through, I was like, I desperately want to be like, I start with a green tea and then I meditate for 30 minutes and then I step outside and look at the sun. But yeah, I was like, fuck. Oh, sorry.
No, it's
There's
all
no
good.
swearing on this podcast. I'm sorry. Um, okay. So yeah, I don't have a really like amazing, beautiful routine like that. I do get up early. I've noticed that I'm not a morning person in the sense that I'm like bubbly and chipper in the morning because I am not. Like I don't want to talk to anyone in the morning. But I'm a morning person in the sense that the morning is when I
I
feel the
love that.
most productive. Like I can kind of like get the most done. And I find that after like 1 or 2
Mhm.
p.m., I'm useless. Like no good ideas are coming out of me after 2 p.m. It's all in the early part of the day. So I like to, because I get up early at like 6 or 7 o'clock, I like at least the first hour of the day to just be used for like whatever I want. So sometimes that looks like just drawing something for me on the iPad that's not related at all to client work, just something that I want to work on, because it's remembering that like most people's work days
Mhm.
don't even start for a few more hours. So it kind of feels like freebie time for me, where I'm like, I can just kind of like sneak in some of the personal stuff I want to work on. I also always start with
Nice.
little
I
like
like that.
brain games. So I have like the New York Times. Yeah, it's a good like just way to keep your mind a little bit sharp. And I've always loved like word games. So I always start with the New York Times mini crossword, and then I'll go on to do some of their other little like mini games. So it's just a good like little
Is this the
brain
actual paper
little
or is
brain
this like
exercises
digital?
first thing in the morning. It's digital. Yeah, it's an app. So you can
Really?
play all of their little mini games for free on their app. Yeah, it's good. And pretty much everyone in my family is also on the app. And with their mini crossword, they have like a leaderboard. So it's like a little competition for like how fast you can do the mini crossword, because it'll have your like how long it took you to do the mini crossword. So that's made it enjoyable because it feels competitive. Because I'm like,
And this
yes,
is
like
the
I can
New
beat my
York Times.
sister. Like it's going to be a good day.
Oh boy,
New York
you have
Times.
just
Yeah.
started something in this
Yeah.
household.
It's good. Send me the invite. We'll be on each other's leaderboard. We'll keep each other on track. Yeah, it's really good because it's just, and it's really funny too to see, because sometimes the crossword will be really
Hmm.
tailored to like Gen Z or like millennial type knowledge. And then when my dad wins, you're like, okay, that was tailored to 55-year-old men. Like, so yeah, it's very
I didn't know
educational.
that that was a thing. Honestly, I only just think New York Times
Yeah.
newspaper. Like I didn't even think that you could they had like a digital version of their crosswords and stuff.
Yeah. I don't even I think my sister sent it to me for the first time. It was like because I think New York Times was the one
Hmm.
behind, you
Yep.
remember like the
Hmm.
Wordle craze of the pandemic when so
Okay,
yeah, the
I got it
Wordle
now.
is
I
part of
get it
one of
now.
their like
Okay,
daily word games. Yeah. So I think that's when people started going like, "Ooh, like
that's
these games
sweet.
are fun." And then yeah.
So what
So
is
yeah,
the
would highly
next,
recommend it.
Christian? I know you're finishing up a Skillshare class. What's next?
Mhm. Yeah, so I don't know for sure what's next, which is like my favorite part of owning a business where I'm just like I have like this time last year I had no idea the different projects that I had on my plate this year. Like I had no clue what would be on the docket. So that's kind of my favorite part. It's also the scariest part because sometimes like I definitely have those moments where I'm like, well, like what if I literally don't get a new project for the next 6 months and then like I have to go work at Starbucks. Like, what will happen? But inevitably, like, there's so many cool projects out there. It always amazes me, just like the projects that come across my plate or the ones that I can throw my hat in the ring for. So, yeah, so client work, that's where I spend the most of my time. And that's probably where I really do the least amount of planning. I've been not fortunate because I've put the work in. Like, I've been lettering for almost 10 years so that I've built up a good solid amount
Hmm.
of like return business as well as people that in my community know to kind of reach out to me for certain projects. So I haven't had to do a
Hmm.
ton of like prospecting in that sense when it comes to client work. So in that sense, it can be good or bad because part of me, I'm like, I'd like to do more prospecting so I can go
Right.
after some of the clients that I really want to work with that like Nike's not just going to reach out to me. Like they don't know who I am. So like going after some of those clients that I would just love the opportunity to work with. So doing some planning around that will be part of what's next in my future, just kind of sitting
Hmm.
down and like, who are my dream clients? Who do I want to start to put some thought into kind of pitching to as opposed to just sitting and waiting for
Nice.
people to reach out to me. And then, yeah, definitely building my digital portfolio of classes that I can share my knowledge with people for. So, Skillshare, I'm working on the new Procreate class. And then I've got kind of a list of other classes that I'd love to offer through Skillshare. So, I'll keep working on those. And then I always have like a
Projects.
million little personal projects in the wings that I'm like, one day, like I'll launch this whatever company. Um, which is the good and bad part of being a creative person and living with a creative husband, is that all the time, like every week, we're like, new business idea. What if? And like just things that will like never see the light of day, but like would be so fun if only. So we'll see which one of
That is
those
a real
gets to
thing
see the
right
light
now.
of day.
Right now, I'm fighting the urge of starting
Right?
a new business right now. And I told my wife on Sunday,
Right?
yes, that,
Do you have one in mind? Say it out loud and
so
then maybe,
it's the part that I get to enjoy is building the branding, but it's a cookie, cookies, a cookie business.
yes,
And
I'm in already. I
I
love
told my
cookies.
wife yesterday, and I was like, something is swirling in my head right now. And she was like, oh boy, there's something always swirling in there. I don't know when there's not something swirling in my head. So before long, you will see me going crazy online about a cookie business that I just started. This is the first time I'm saying it
Ooh.
outside of my wife and kids. So you're the first person.
Oh my God, I love that. I am honored and I fully believe in your cookie business. I love it. I feel like there's so, like, yeah, I just love the idea of, I feel like everyone that's creative probably has, like, well, if money was no object, I would go all in on this thing. And I love when people actually can go all in on,
Mm-hmm.
like, for me, it was the seed packets where I'm like, oh, it's like that create the things that you wish
100%.
existed idea of like, you just see an opportunity where you're like, of course cookies exist, but not in the way that I would do them. And I have this vision and like, it's so cool. I
We'll
can't wait
see.
to see what it looks
We'll
like.
see. We'll see.
I'll be
Sweet.
waiting.
Before we
That's
close,
awesome.
what parting advice or anything that you say, you know what? I would love to share this with any creative or just anyone that would listen to this podcast out there.
Yeah, I think it would be like the cliche saying of like,
Hmm.
feel the fear and do it anyway. Like, just that idea of like, just start and just do it and just try and push through those feelings that you might have of like
Hmm.
the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, all of those things. They're going to be there with anything that you do, but just start and like, just try and push through because so many people just never get to achieve what they want because they stop at that first rejection or that first fear, that first sign that like maybe I shouldn't be doing this. So just try to stay on the path of like, what if it all goes right?
That's true.
What if it all works out? And just because I want to see what everyone has to say and what everyone has to create. And it's so easy to be like,
Mhm.
maybe I shouldn't start that cookie company. Like Chips Ahoy exists. Like, what more is there? Like, but being able to be like, no, like, no one does it like you. Like, you have a special ability to do something unique. And I think it's just so special when people actually get to create something that's out there. So yeah, try to remember that like nobody cares, but in the best way possible. Like nobody cares in the sense that like everyone's on their own path. They're not looking at you and going like, I hope his cookie company fails. Like as much as you want to believe that, no one's thinking about that. Mostly
That
people
is
want
so
you to
true. I
succeed.
love how
So
you put it.
just
No one
start.
cares, but in a good way. Like they're not thinking
Thank
about
you.
you that much.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're in
totally.
their own
Yeah, like
world doing their own
everyone,
thing.
yeah, people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So
Exactly.
where can
Yeah,
people go to
100%.
find you and learn more about you?
Yeah, so I am most often sharing everything that I do on Instagram. So they can find me at KDP Letters on Instagram. So yeah, that's where I share all the latest projects. As we're talking, I'm like, oh shit, I haven't shared anything in like 3 weeks, but I'll catch up. There will soon be more content shared. Yeah, so that's honestly the best place. I love when people send me messages and engage with me,
That
so
is
they can reach
awesome.
out
Well,
anytime.
Kristen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. This was so fun. What a good start to a Monday. Thank
Awesome.
you.